Hollywood loves to present itself as a world of endless opportunity, but behind the shimmering surface lies a long list of stars who suddenly stopped receiving calls, emails, or invitations to audition. Some burned every bridge with their own behavior, some became too controversial for studios, terrified of backlash, and others simply fell out of favor because of ego, conflicts, or a reputation that no publicist could fix. These are the names executives avoid, the faces productions won't insure, and the former icons who quietly vanished from casting boards without a single announcement. What exactly pushed each of them out of Hollywood's good graces? Who went from headlining major films to being completely unemployable? And which case is considered the most shocking downfall of all? Stay until the very end, because the final name is a fall from grace that even insiders still whisper about. 15. Brendan Fraser. Brendan Fraser was once one of the most reliable box office anchors of his era, rising from light-hearted comedies to global blockbusters that defined late 90s adventure cinema. His physical commitment to stunts made him a favorite among directors who needed an actor willing to throw himself into demanding scenes, and his charisma made audiences instantly connect with him. Yet behind the adventurous roles and warm persona, Fraser was struggling with a series of personal and professional challenges that gradually pushed him out of Hollywood's inner circle. Years of stunt-related injuries required multiple surgeries, leaving him in chronic pain and limiting the physical roles he was once famous for. At the same time, he spoke publicly about experiencing inappropriate behavior from a major industry figure, an admission that quietly shifted his reputation within certain circles and allegedly affected how studios viewed him. As his career entered the early 2000s, Fraser found fewer and fewer opportunities coming his way. Hollywood's preference for younger, physically intense leads worked against him, but more importantly, his long absence from the spotlight led executives to perceive him as a financial risk. Despite his talent and earlier success, his name no longer guaranteed commercial returns, and in an industry governed by profitability, that was enough to push him aside. Fraser's decline became so pronounced that many fans wondered whether he had retired entirely. Only in recent years did public sentiment begin to shift, leading to a wave of support that opened new doors. However, for a long period, studios simply chose not to cast him not because of scandal, but because Hollywood often discards its former heroes once they can no longer deliver the same physical spectacle. His story stands as a reminder of how quickly the industry can replace even its most beloved figures. 14. Katherine Heigl. Katherine Heigl entered Hollywood with the kind of momentum most actors only dream of. After rising to fame through television, drama, and romantic comedies, she became one of the industry's most in-demand actresses, known for her timing, versatility, and strong on-screen presence. But behind the polished performances, her professional reputation began shifting in ways that would eventually overshadow her talent. Comments she made about the writing quality of her own hit show and a public criticism of a major director placed her at odds with powerful figures who controlled casting decisions. In an industry that relies heavily on maintaining smooth relationships, her remarks were seen as a challenge to the collaborative process, which quietly began closing doors around her. As time passed, accounts circulated about her being difficult to work with, stories describing long delays, creative disputes, and a level of perfectionism perceived as combative rather than constructive. While some of these stories were exaggerated or taken out of context, Hollywood's perception hardened quickly. Studios grew wary of casting someone who might generate tension on set, fearing cost overruns or negative press that could harm a project. The result was a swift and dramatic decline in leading roles, leaving Heigl's career at a standstill despite her proven ability to draw audiences. Her transition into smaller projects and independent productions wasn't a matter of diminishing skill, but rather the consequence of an industry that often prioritizes predictability over talent. Once a reputation shifts, Hollywood is notoriously unforgiving. Even as Heigl made efforts to rebuild her image, the mainstream casting opportunities that once came effortlessly no longer arrived. Her story illustrates how quickly professional momentum can evaporate when public narratives overpower actual performance. 13. Taylor Lautner. Taylor Lautner became a global sensation almost overnight, propelled to superstardom by a franchise that dominated pop culture for years. His athletic build, youthful charm, and massive fan base positioned him as one of Hollywood's most promising young actors. Yet once the franchise ended, the momentum that once carried his career forward nearly disappeared. Industry insiders noted that Lautner struggled to break away from the image that made him famous. Casting directors found it difficult to envision him in more mature, complex roles, and many projects hesitated to take the risk of redefining his on-screen identity. At the same time, several of his early post-franchise films underperformed commercially, reinforcing the perception that his star power did not naturally extend outside the blockbuster universe that launched him. Hollywood is an industry built on metrics, and when films with significant budgets failed to generate returns, studios began labeling him as a box office uncertainty. Once that label sticks, major casting opportunities tend to vanish quickly. This situation was compounded by long gaps between roles, giving the impression that he lacked versatility or the dramatic range directors sought. Lautner himself also stepped away from Hollywood for personal reasons, prioritizing stability and privacy over constant exposure. While this decision was healthy on a personal level, it signaled to studios that he wasn't actively pursuing the intense, career-defining roles that often build longevity. In an industry where visibility and momentum are everything, such pauses can be interpreted as a retreat rather than a reset. Despite later efforts to re-enter the industry with smaller projects, the casting landscape had already shifted. New generations of young actors filled the space he once occupied, and Hollywood, always eager for the next rising star, moved on quickly. Lautner's journey reflects how even massive worldwide fame can fade when timing, perception, and industry expectations collide unfavorably. 12. Lindsay Lohan. Lindsay Lohan was once one of Hollywood's most bankable young stars, transitioning seamlessly from childhood success to mainstream leading roles. Her natural comedic timing, expressive range, and undeniable screen presence made her a favorite among directors who saw her as a long-term investment. But as her fame escalated, so did the pressures surrounding it. A series of legal issues, missed call times, and high-profile personal struggles slowly eroded the trust studios once placed in her. Hollywood is built on reliability, and even the most talented performers can find themselves sidelined when their off-screen life becomes too unpredictable. Production companies grew increasingly hesitant to insure her films, a major red flag that often determines whether an actor is cast or replaced. On several projects, delays attributed to her personal challenges caused rising production costs, reinforcing the perception that working with her carried significant financial and logistical risk. While many of these moments stemmed from genuine personal difficulties rather than intentional misconduct, the impact on her professional reputation was severe and long-lasting. As the industry shifted toward safer, more controlled casting practices, Lohan found fewer opportunities that matched her former level of fame. She attempted comebacks through independent productions, television ventures, and international projects, but Hollywood's larger studios remained cautious. Over time, her absence from major films created a feedback loop. Fewer roles meant less visibility, and less visibility meant even fewer casting chances. Yet, despite the setbacks, her talent never disappeared. Many filmmakers and fans still believe she has the potential for a major return, especially as Hollywood becomes more open to redemption arcs and second chances. But for a significant period, the industry simply chose not to cast her, not because she lacked ability, but because the risk outweighed the reward in the eyes of studio executives. 11. Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf's early career trajectory was the kind Hollywood rarely sees an actor who moved effortlessly from television success to blockbuster dominance, earning critical respect and mainstream appeal at the same time. His performances displayed a raw emotional intensity that directors admired, and he quickly became a key figure in several major franchises. But as the spotlight intensified, his public behavior began overshadowing his work. A series of arrests, outbursts, and controversial performance art stunts created a perception of volatility that studios grew increasingly unwilling to manage. The turning point arrived when multiple legal and personal controversies surfaced, including accusations that damaged his public image and raised serious concerns within the industry. Film productions operate on tight schedules and substantial investments, and any hint of instability from a leading actor can jeopardize an entire project. LaBeouf's unpredictable behavior, ranging from erratic interviews to allegations of misconduct, made him a liability in the eyes of executives already wary of public backlash and financial risk. At the same time, the industry shifted towards stricter oversight of on-set conduct and off-screen reputation. Stars once tolerated for eccentric or self-destructive behavior faced new scrutiny, and LaBeouf found himself on the wrong side of that cultural shift. Even when he delivered strong performances in independent films, major studios avoided attaching themselves to an actor who attracted constant controversy. His undeniable talent became secondary to the headlines that followed him. LaBeouf later acknowledged many of his struggles and sought personal rehabilitation, earning respect from some corners of the industry. Yet the gap created by years of instability proved difficult to bridge. Hollywood rarely forgets risk, and for an extended period, casting him became a decision most studios refused to entertain. His story is one of enormous talent repeatedly derailed by personal chaos, an illustration of how quickly opportunity can vanish when reputation overtakes ability. 10. Meg Ryan. Meg Ryan was once the undisputed face of romantic cinema, defining an entire era of heartfelt storytelling with performances that felt warm, genuine, and effortlessly charming. She dominated the box office for years, appearing in films that became cultural touchstones and cemented her reputation as America's sweetheart. Yet as Hollywood evolved, the roles that had once fit her so naturally began to disappear. The industry shifted away from classic romance toward action-heavy blockbusters, darker dramas, and franchise-driven storytelling genres where Ryan was rarely considered a natural fit. At the same time, the public scrutiny surrounding her personal life and certain career choices created a narrative that was difficult to shake. A highly publicized relationship scandal altered how audiences and studios perceived her, unfairly reducing her to tabloid headlines rather than the skilled performer she had always been. When a few of her later films underperformed, Hollywood used those results as justification to move on, rather than invest in reintroducing her to new audiences. Ryan's attempts to take more creative control, including directing and producing, showed ambition and range, but they also distanced her from the consistent stream of roles that kept actors visible. In an industry obsessed with momentum, even a short pause can be misinterpreted as a decline in relevance. By the time she expressed interest in returning to acting, Hollywood had already filled the space she once occupied with younger talent and new faces, leaving her without the steady opportunities she had previously enjoyed. None of this reflected a loss of ability, only a shift in how the industry viewed aging actresses and a reluctance to invest in stars from previous decades. Ryan's story highlights how Hollywood often sidelines even its most beloved icons once trends change, leaving behind performers who once shaped entire genres. Despite her legacy, studios simply stopped calling, not because she couldn't deliver, but because Hollywood chose to rewrite the definition of a leading lady without her. 9. Charlie Sheen. Charlie Sheen's fall from Hollywood's favor is one of the most dramatic and widely publicized collapses the industry has ever seen. At his peak, he was the highest-paid actor on television, anchoring a sitcom that drew massive weekly audiences and generating profits that studios dream about. His comedic timing, natural charisma, and long-standing industry relationships positioned him as an irreplaceable star. But behind the scenes, years of personal struggles, public outbursts, and escalating conflicts slowly created a storm that Hollywood could no longer ignore. Sheen's behavior grew increasingly unpredictable, marked by erratic interviews, substance-related issues, and repeated clashes with producers and showrunners. When he publicly criticized the creator of his own hit series, the professional relationship fractured beyond repair. The situation escalated to such a degree that the studio took the unprecedented step of firing its biggest star, a move that revealed how unmanageable he had become. His subsequent media appearances, filled with bizarre catchphrases and combative comments, only reinforced the perception that he was spiraling out of control. From a business standpoint, hiring Sheen became a massive risk. Productions require reliability, insurability, and consistency, and Sheen represented the opposite. Insurers were reluctant to back projects involving him, executives feared negative press, and networks doubted his ability to maintain professionalism on set. Even as he attempted comebacks, the stir of controversy surrounding him overshadowed any potential creative value he could bring. The industry simply decided it wasn't worth betting millions on a star who could derail an entire production overnight. In recent years, Sheen has expressed regret and sought to rebuild his reputation, showing a calmer, more reflective side of himself. But Hollywood's memory is long, and the damage caused during his most chaotic period has proven difficult to reverse. His absence from major casting lists is not a matter of lost talent, but a cautionary tale about how quickly trust evaporates when personal turmoil becomes the headline. 8. Amanda Bynes. Amanda Bynes was once viewed as one of the brightest comedic talents of her generation, transitioning effortlessly from youth-oriented sketch comedy to mainstream film success. Her timing, expressiveness, and ability to carry entire projects made her a rare standout in an industry that often struggles to nurture young comic actors into long-term stars. For a while, her trajectory looked unstoppable: movie roles, critical praise, and a growing fan base that saw her as a refreshing presence in Hollywood. But as she moved into adulthood, the pressure, scrutiny, and expectations surrounding her career began to take a toll that gradually pushed her away from the spotlight. Her public struggles, which included concerning behavior and mental health challenges, became frequent tabloid fuel. Hollywood studios, notoriously cautious about risk, quietly withdrew. Ensuring productions that relied on her became increasingly difficult, and the unpredictability of her public appearances raised concerns about whether she could reliably anchor large-scale projects. These issues had nothing to do with talent, and everything to do with the industry's unwillingness to engage with an actor navigating serious personal difficulties. At the same time, Bynes stepped back from acting entirely, declaring a break from the industry to focus on her well-being and pursue education in the fashion and design world. Although this was a healthy decision on a personal level, the hiatus reinforced Hollywood's perception that she was unreachable for casting consideration. In an environment where visibility and momentum matter enormously, years away from the screen made her easy to overlook and even easier for studios to write off entirely. Her eventual re-emergence, accompanied by sincere efforts to rebuild stability, sparked hope among longtime fans who still see her as a major talent capable of returning to form. But Hollywood, driven by profits and predictability, remains hesitant. For now, Bynes stands as an example of how quickly an industry built on pressure and publicity can abandon even its most gifted performers the moment their personal life becomes too fragile for the machine to accommodate. 7. Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes was once one of Hollywood's most dependable action stars, a performer who combined martial arts precision with a sharp dramatic edge, making him a standout presence in thrillers, comedies, and blockbuster franchises. His role in a pioneering comic book series cemented his status as a cultural icon, proving that he could lead a major studio property with global appeal. But as his fame peaked, behind-the-scenes tensions and legal troubles began shaping a narrative that slowly cut him out of Hollywood's casting circles. The most significant blow came from his high-profile legal case involving tax issues. The situation led to intense public scrutiny, a lengthy court battle, and eventually time away from Hollywood that interrupted his professional momentum. Studios, always wary of financial and reputational risk, viewed the case as a major liability. In addition, stories emerged from former collaborators describing on-set conflicts, creative disputes, and difficult working conditions. Whether exaggerated or not, these accounts influenced how producers assessed the potential challenges of hiring him. While Snipes remained undeniably talented, the combination of legal trouble and reputation concerns created barriers that proved increasingly difficult to overcome. Hollywood began shifting toward younger action stars, larger franchise ensembles, and new cinematic trends that no longer relied on the lone, stoic action hero archetype Snipes once embodied. By the time he fully returned to the industry, audiences and studios had already moved on, leaving him with fewer mainstream opportunities and limited casting offers from major studios. Despite these setbacks, Snipes continued pursuing independent projects, carving out a niche where his experience and presence still carried weight. He demonstrated professionalism, discipline, and commitment in several later roles, but the stigma from his earlier controversies lingered far longer than expected. His absence from major casting lists isn't a reflection of lost skill. It's the result of Hollywood's long memory and its tendency to replace even its biggest stars the moment their career trajectory becomes complicated. 6. Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard once appeared destined for long-term Hollywood dominance. With a distinctive voice, commanding presence, and the ability to shift seamlessly between emotional vulnerability and explosive intensity, he delivered performances that earned critical acclaim and award nominations. His early work positioned him as one of the most compelling actors of his generation, and for a time, major studios viewed him as a rising force. But as his career advanced, a series of off-screen controversies and on-set disputes gradually reshaped how Hollywood perceived him. One of the earliest turning points came from his departure from a major superhero franchise. Reports surfaced of contract disagreements and salary conflicts, with insiders claiming he clashed with producers over compensation. Regardless of the finer details, the situation painted him as difficult to negotiate, with an image that made large studios hesitant to involve him in long-term, high-budget projects. Negotiation disputes alone wouldn't usually end a career, but for Howard, they coincided with other issues that amplified Hollywood's concerns. Over the years, Howard also faced multiple legal disputes and headlines involving his personal life. Even when these situations were complex or contested, Hollywood reacted as it often does, by quietly distancing itself from anyone perceived as unpredictable or high risk. In an industry built on expensive schedules and delicate publicity management, studios often prefer actors who generate no waves at all. Howard's combination of brilliance and volatility made him a gamble many were no longer willing to take. At the same time, his reputation for intense on-set behavior, stories of conflicts, philosophical arguments, and difficulty adhering to production expectations further complicated his casting prospects. While some collaborators admired his passion, others found it disruptive. As newer generations of actors emerged and Hollywood leaned towards safer, more controllable personalities, Howard found himself receiving fewer mainstream opportunities. His later success on television proved he still had extraordinary talent, but once that project ended, Hollywood did not rush to bring him back into major studio films. His disappearance from casting boards reflects a familiar Hollywood pattern. The industry will embrace difficult geniuses only as long as their output outweighs the complications. When the balance shifts, the calls stop. 5. Armie Hammer. Armie Hammer's rise in Hollywood was fast, polished, and seemingly unstoppable. He possessed the look, the charm, and the screen presence studios loved to build long-term careers around. Early performances showcased his range, and for a time, he was positioned as a future leading man ready to anchor major studio films. But that momentum collapsed almost overnight when a series of disturbing allegations emerged, sparking widespread media attention and triggering one of the most sudden career breakdowns in recent Hollywood history. As the allegations circulated, Hammer withdrew from multiple projects, including high-profile films and television roles. Even before any formal investigations concluded, the surrounding controversy became too overwhelming for studios to ignore. Hollywood, always hyper-aware of public perception, immediately distanced itself. Casting directors removed his name from consideration, productions replaced him, and several of his completed works stalled or underwent edits to reduce his presence. In an era when reputational risk can torpedo a project's financial prospects, studios decided that associating with Hammer was simply not worth the gamble. Beyond the allegations, the collapse of his career highlighted a broader industry reality. Once a star becomes the center of a cultural storm, Hollywood often acts swiftly and decisively. Regardless of nuance, the industry's instinct is protection of profits, public trust, and brand image. Hammer's association with controversy made him nearly uninsurable, a major factor that determines whether actors can be cast in large-scale productions. In the aftermath, Hammer stepped away from the spotlight entirely, retreating from public life while attempting to rebuild stability. Yet even as he addressed personal matters privately, Hollywood showed no sign of re-engagement. Scripts stopped arriving, directors moved on, and the roles he once seemed destined for were handed to other rising stars without hesitation. Today, Hammer's absence from major casting lists reflects how quickly the industry can shut its doors once an actor becomes entangled in controversy. His story is not about fading talent, it's about how reputational shockwaves can end a career long before any official verdict is reached. 4. Roseanne Barr. Roseanne Barr was once one of television's most influential figures, reshaping the landscape of sitcoms with a show that portrayed working-class life in a way few series had ever attempted. Her sharp comedic style, unfiltered honesty, and willingness to break traditional boundaries made her a cultural force. For years, she commanded enormous ratings and held a level of power that few television stars ever achieve. But the same boldness that made her iconic eventually became the catalyst for her downfall when a highly controversial social media post ignited widespread backlash and forced Hollywood to sever ties almost instantly. The network behind her revived sitcom acted swiftly, canceling the show within hours and distancing itself from her name entirely. In an era where corporations aggressively manage public image, the controversy surrounding Barr was deemed too volatile to navigate. Executives feared advertiser pullouts, audience boycotts, and prolonged media scrutiny. Even though the show continued under a new title, Barr herself was removed from the project, demonstrating how dramatically the industry can react when public outcry reaches a critical mass. Her attempts to explain, contextualize, or walk back the remarks did little to repair the situation. Hollywood's response remained firm. She represented a reputational risk too great for any mainstream studio, network, or streaming platform to handle. The speed at which doors closed suggested that industry decision-makers had already been uneasy with her outspoken persona long before the incident. The post simply accelerated a shift that had been building quietly behind the scenes. Barr continued making independent appearances, participating in podcast interviews, and maintaining a loyal fan base, but the major casting opportunities that once defined her career vanished. To Hollywood, the combination of controversy, unpredictable commentary, and intense media reaction made her essentially uncastable. Her story illustrates the modern reality of the entertainment industry. One public moment can override decades of achievement, and redemption, no matter how sincere, may never fully reopen the doors that slammed shut. 3. Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey was once regarded as one of the most gifted actors of his generation, a performer with remarkable range, commanding presence, and the rare ability to elevate every project he touched. His roles in acclaimed films and his celebrated run on a prestige television series established him as a powerhouse whose name alone could secure financing and awards attention. For years, studios, directors, and networks viewed him as a cornerstone talent capable of carrying entire franchises. But his career collapsed almost instantaneously when a wave of serious allegations emerged, triggering one of the most rapid industry exiles Hollywood has ever enacted. Within days of the accusations, productions halted, networks cut ties, and studios erased him from projects already in progress. A major streaming giant removed him from its flagship series, and another studio reshot an entire film at enormous cost to eliminate his presence. Hollywood's reaction was unprecedented in speed, reflecting both the gravity of the allegations and the industry's increasing desire to distance itself from controversy that could damage brand reputation. For executives, the decision wasn't only moral, it was financial. Spacey had become uninsurable, unpredictable, and an unavoidable lightning rod for backlash. Even after legal outcomes became more complex than early headlines suggested, Hollywood remained unmoved. The court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict, and for the industry, that mattered more than any legal ruling. Spacey attempted to resurface through small-scale online monologues and low-budget European productions, but these efforts reinforced the reality of his exile rather than repairing it. The major studios, networks, and streaming platforms showed no interest in rehabilitating his image, fearing renewed controversy with every association. Spacey's disappearance from casting lists is arguably the clearest example of modern Hollywood's zero-tolerance approach to reputational risk. Talent alone, no matter how exceptional, was not enough to counter the damage of the allegations. His fall remains one of the most abrupt in entertainment history. A top-tier actor whose career ended not gradually, but in a near-instant collapse. 2. Gina Carano. Gina Carano's rise in Hollywood was unconventional but impactful. Transitioning from a successful career in mixed martial arts to action-heavy film and television roles, she quickly built a reputation as a physically commanding performer with strong screen presence. Her work on a major streaming series elevated her profile significantly, positioning her as a potential long-term player in the expanding universe of blockbuster franchises. For a moment, she appeared to be on the cusp of sustained mainstream success until a sequence of social media posts ignited controversy that dramatically shifted her trajectory. The posts, viewed by many as politically inflammatory or insensitive, sparked intense online debate and drew widespread public criticism. In today's entertainment landscape, where studios are highly sensitive to public perception, any controversy can escalate quickly. Within a short period, the company behind the series severed ties with her entirely. Merchandising halted, future appearances were cancelled, and major talent agencies stepped back. The message was clear. Carano had become a reputational risk they were unwilling to navigate. The fallout extended far beyond one role. Casting directors, aware of the potential for renewed public backlash, avoided attaching her to upcoming projects. Even productions that might have benefited from her action-oriented abilities chose to distance themselves, fearing that association could overshadow their work. Hollywood often operates on caution, and once an actor becomes the center of a polarizing cultural moment, the safest choice for studios is to look elsewhere. Despite this, Carano remained active outside the mainstream system, working with independent studios and cultivating a dedicated fan base. Yet none of these moves have shifted Hollywood's overall stance. For major networks and film companies, the combination of controversy and online volatility continues to outweigh the value of her talent. Her absence from casting boards is a reflection of modern Hollywood's uncompromising approach to brand protection. A world where one digital misstep can permanently close doors that once seemed wide open. 1. Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson's journey from Hollywood titan to industry exile is one of the most dramatic and complex in modern entertainment history. For decades, he was a dominant force, an actor whose charisma anchored global blockbusters and a director whose work earned critical acclaim massive box office success, and top-tier awards. His storytelling instincts, commanding presence, and ability to balance commercial appeal with artistic ambition made him one of the most influential figures of his era. But a series of public controversies, recorded outbursts, and widely criticized remarks drastically altered how Hollywood viewed him, triggering a professional collapse that seemed unthinkable during the height of his career. The turning point arrived when highly publicized recordings and incidents circulated through media outlets, igniting widespread backlash. Studios quickly distanced themselves, fearing association with the inflammatory comments attributed to him. Long-standing partnerships dissolved, development deals evaporated, and Gibson, once one of Hollywood's most bankable stars, found himself essentially blacklisted. Executives viewed him as a reputational hazard, someone whose presence in a film could alienate audiences, damage marketing campaigns, or spark boycotts. Compounding the issue, additional allegations and legal disputes further eroded the industry's willingness to extend him any benefit of the doubt. Whether or not the complexities of each situation were fully understood, public perception had crystallized. Hollywood's response was decisive. Gibson's name simply disappeared from mainstream casting lists. Producers and directors, even those who admired his talent, avoided collaborating with him due to fear of scrutiny and financial risk. The industry's unofficial rule became clear: no project could safely withstand the controversy attached to his name. Years later, Gibson attempted a slow return through smaller directing and acting roles. While these efforts demonstrated that his talent remained intact, they did little to restore his former status. Hollywood tolerated him on the periphery, but the leading roles, major budgets, and prestige opportunities that once came naturally were no longer available. His story stands as the ultimate example of how quickly the entertainment industry can close its doors, even on its former giants, when public controversy becomes too explosive to contain. Hollywood may shine brighter than any other industry, but it also moves faster and forgets faster than most people can imagine. These actors remind us that no level of fame guarantees longevity, and no career is untouchable when public pressure, controversy, or shifting trends collide. Some may eventually find a way back, others may continue their work far from the spotlight, and a few may never return at all. But each story leaves one clear message. In Hollywood, the climb is never as fragile as the fall. If you want more deep dives into the hidden corners of the entertainment world, make sure to stay with Tick Tick, where the truth behind fame is always one story away.